Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of the Expect Performance podcast. And today, it's just me and you. Today, I thought I'd try something a little bit different. We're going to go with something that's been on my mind for the last couple of weeks. As you might know, I've got a baby boy, young baby Grayson, who's 5.5 months old at the moment. And it's caused me to think about and be more aware of children, newborns, the developmental phases that they go through. And then philosophically, principles that one can observe in the interest of self-development that we are born with. And as kids come naturally, but over time we start to lose, the burden of responsibility as an adult, that slow grind of day-to-day life. And don't get me wrong, that responsibility that one has to adopt as an adult is not only necessary, but it's an antidote to living a life of nihilism, and it allows one to live a life of meaning, and that can be constructive in society, as well as raising kids that are the next generation of being productive in society. So let me prefix this episode, which is lessons that we can learn from children, with the fact that I acknowledge that adults have to have a certain element of responsibility. We are not Peter Pan, the kid that never grows up. It is necessary, but I think over time we tend to lose our inner child, and we tend to lose the fun and the zest and the exuberance of life. And I think that these lessons that I've learned so far, these 4 lessons, are a stark reminder to what we should come home to as our essence, and what we can always come back to for enjoyment and for fulfillment. So here we go. Lesson number 1, curiosity. Curiosity as an adult could very much be considered an antidote, or at least a repellent, to our inherent biases that we have picked up over years and years of being around. And what I mean by that is curiosity is rooted in the pre-existing notion that you've accepted the potential outcome of having your mind changed. It means bringing my experiences to the table, but being genuinely curious about the fact that your experiences might be completely different to mine, and might, in actual fact, contradict my experiences. But at the end of that conversation, at the end of that experience and that engagement, it might leave me being a better person, and it might leave you being a better person, as we've learned from each other. But that doesn't come without the pre-existing acceptance that there's room for your mind to be changed. So regarding happiness, studies have found that daily curiosity levels predict strong happiness levels and personal growth. So that's not something that's hard to imagine. People are less likely to develop depression if you're genuinely more curious. Children are innately curious. They are in awe of everything that they come into contact with. The wind rustling through the trees, the leaves falling on the floor, the TV turning on, the dogs barking, the feel of the couch on their feet and on their hands and on their tummy. Everything is this kaleidoscope of sensations. And with that comes a curiosity of wanting to explore and wanting to learn. What happens if I do this? What happens if I touch that? And yes, you get your fingers burnt, of course, but It's that never-ending pursuit of learning and wanting to be a sponge and rooted in curiosity. That is something that I think we can all reignite as we get through the daily grind as adults. One thing that's been particularly difficult in the research regarding curiosity is to effectively label and define it. So for the purposes of this discussion, I'll define it as the philosopher and psychologist William James defined it in 1899. And he said, curiosity is the impulse towards better cognition, meaning that it is the desire to understand what you know that you do not, which is a pre-existing condition of understanding that you're willing and open to have your mind changed on something. Now, there's two types of curiosity. There's interest curiosity and there's deprivation curiosity, as I've found it and as I've experienced. Interest curiosity is the good curiosity. It's the curiosity that arises from a genuine interest and fascination on a particular subject or activity and experience. It's driven by intrinsic motivation, where individuals are naturally drawn to explore, to feel, to capture the essence of the moment and to spark their curiosity. This often leads to deep engagement and an enjoyment of the process, which comes to being in the present, which is lesson number 2. Now, there's a less productive form of curiosity, and it's called deprivation curiosity. And this emerges when an individual feels a lack or a deficiency in their knowledge of a particular experience or thing in a certain area. So their curiosity is driven by a desire to fill the gaps in understanding and fill the sense of curiosity that arises from feeling deprived of information and opportunities. So this curiosity is driven by a feeling of deprivation, of lack, and of inadequacy. That is not something that is sustainable long term, and it's not something that's going to allow you to be happy, like I referred to earlier in the research on curiosity, saying that we are more likely to be happy if you're genuinely more curious. So see what happens, experience things, be open to new things. Try not to be biased. Be more curious. That's lesson number 1. Be okay with uncertainty. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned, and this comes to lesson number 2, which is to be resilient. Bounce back from setbacks and uncertainty. The most successful people that I've spoken to in my life so far, the one defining factor that they have that separates them from other people who've been less materially and financially successful is they have higher stress tolerance. They have a healthy, and stress meaning uncertainty. They have a healthier relationship with uncertainty, and they have a healthy relationship with failure and setbacks. And I think that's what it means to be resilient. And if I watch my baby boy progressing through his movement patterns as he progresses from lying on his back to now he's learning how to roll, and in future he'll crawl, kneel, stand, off he goes, and he's running, and all chaos breaks loose after that. But that resilience and that nature to continue to persevere despite the fact that he first learned to roll onto one side and not the other. He first learned to roll, in his case, onto his tummy, from his back onto his tummy, and then he couldn't get back. So he couldn't roll from belly to back. Yet, if we had to take the equivalent in an adult environment, maybe in a professional setting, that consistent setback might lead to poor self-esteem, poor self-image, pessimism, and might lead you to quit. However, I encourage you to learn from children, learn from their resilience, that they continue to persevere in the face of setbacks because they don't know another way how to be. It's only over time that we get spoken out of doing things, be it in the way that we're raised, be it in the feedback that we get from the rest of the world, and then place on ourselves. But it's our relationship with failure that ultimately determines our success. Adam Grant, in his wonderful book, Hidden Potential, The Science of Achieving Greater Things, he introduces the concept of scaffolding to overcome obstacles. Sometimes kids get stuck. Like I said, Grayson can't get from one role to the other. So scaffolding comes in where we require temporary assistance to enable us to take stock, to learn, to then build the necessary skills to level up, to get past that level. And then we might not require scaffolding for a while until we encounter the next setback or stumbling block. And scaffolding comes from other people. It comes from consulting experts. It comes from having a support system. It comes from chatting to people who've had similar experiences previously and they've managed to push on through and they've got to the next level. That's what scaffolding means in the sense of self-improvement and unlocking your hidden potential. So be resilient. Overcome failure and uncertainty and persevere. Number 3, be in the moment. Being in the moment is possibly the most important thing that anybody could ever do. It's what many people, including Eckhart Tolle, the author of The Power of Now, describes to be enlightenment. And to be in the moment is really crucially linked to the first one, which is curiosity. And it's because it's to be in awe of what is around you. The sheer fact that we live in an environment that harbors life, that has oxygen, that has an atmosphere, is already an extremely unlikely occurrence. And yet we are able to reap the benefits of that on a daily basis. The fact that we can engage with the people around us, the fact that we can do things that no other animals on this planet can do, and thus have experiences that no other animals can have, is not something that we should overlook. In the day-to-day, we get lost in the never-ending to-do list of what we have to do to get the most out of our day, to get the most out of our jobs. Very often they're jobs that we don't even like doing. And yet we miss the moments that are happening all day, every day. There are no 2 days that are the same. None. The wind never blows the exact same direction. The same amount of leaves are not on the tree the next day as they were the previous day. You don't see the same cars on the road at the same time. You don't see the exact people that you see every single day. You don't see the exact people in the exact same mood and the exact same circumstances every single day. Everything is dynamic. It's fluid. It's moving. It's changing all the time. Be in awe of that. When you start to be aware and be in awe of how every single day is completely different, all of a sudden you forget the previous mindset, which was it's the same thing over and over again. It's that repetitive drumming, grinding. Yet every day is completely different. And as you start to become aware of everything that's different from the previous day, being rooted in the moment, You will then start to bring into your life things that bring you more of that sensation, that make you in awe of more things. Your life becomes way more fulfilling. But how do we train this? How do we train and learn to be in the moment? Because being in fitness, I try to base my opinions on science. I try to root them in scientific facts. And one of the best ways to do this is through mindfulness meditation. Meditation is a mental state achieved by concentrating on the present moment while calmly accepting the feelings and thoughts that come to you, used as a technique to help you relax. That's according to the Oxford English Dictionary. Now, research shows that meditation have increased exponentially. The prevalence of meditation has increased exponentially worldwide since 2012, which is great news. It's far more mainstream and accepted. Study reviews that include over 1,500 participants collectively suggest that people who practice meditation and mindfulness successfully see reductions in stress, anxiety, and in some cases, even weight loss. This is likely due to people who have an emotional and a mental connection to stress. So when you and eating. So when you're eating poorly, it's because you're stressed and you get some kind of a short-term reward or reprieve of your stress by eating something unhealthy, overeating, or being mindless in your eating, not realizing how much you're eating and how quickly you're eating. Again, being on autopilot. If you're in the moment and you are paying full attention to the taste of your food, the amount of your food, the texture, the temperature, you're far more likely to be more aware of what you're eating and how much you're eating, and then therefore eat healthier and be in better condition, physically and mentally. There's a wonderful book called Big Panda and Tiny Dragon by James Norbury. And the best example I can think of being in the moment are the next three examples that I'm going to discuss with you. And if I can quote the book, Tiny Dragon asks Big Panda, "What are you thinking about?" "Nothing," said Big Panda. "It's wonderful." Another quote, "You're quiet today," said Tiny Dragon. Big Panda smiled. "I don't think I can improve on the sound of the rain." And how often do we find ourselves complaining of the rain, especially in Durbs? If it's not sunny every day, it's terrible weather. And yet the rain brings its own sense of magic and majesty. Eckhart Tolle, who's written one of the best books, if not the best book ever on being in the moment, it's called The Power of Now. He says, enlightenment is the space between your thoughts. It's not what we think about, but what happens in between that brings peace. There's so much space around us that we aren't paying attention to because we're caught up in this information overload, this perpetual cycle of stress and anxiety. One of my favorite quotes from Eckhart says the following: "Pay attention to the gap between two thoughts, the brief silent space between words in a conversation, between the notes of the piano or flute, or the gap between in-breath and out-breath." When you pay attention to those gaps, awareness of something becomes just awareness. The formless dimension of pure consciousness arises from within you and replaces identification with form. So let me ask you this. can you take 3 deep breaths in through the nose and then followed by 3 deep breaths out, exhalations through the mouth, and focusing exclusively on those 3 breaths? There's a good chance, if you're like me, when I tried it for the first time, you can't. Your mind is shooting all over the place to what you have to do tomorrow. The weekend's nearly over. It's the start of the new week. It's Monday. I can't believe the weekend's finished. I've got to go drop the kids. I've got to take this. I've got to do that. You have to learn to train your mind to be better at being in the present. A great app for that is called Headspace. And I use Headspace on a daily basis, and I would encourage you to do the same. They take you through coaching on how to meditate, and there are different levels that they can progress you through from a beginner to an advanced meditator. All right, moving on to the final lesson, which is to have fun. Do something just because you love it. Now, I wouldn't consider even being a trainer, a strength and conditioning specialist myself. I wouldn't consider exercising to be fun. Sometimes it's a grind. Most of my gym sessions I don't enjoy. Yet I do it anyway because I dislike not the feeling of not gymming more than I dislike the feeling of training and the uncomfortability of training at the time. So have fun, man. Do something just because you love to do it, for no other reason. So let me ask you this. Do you have a hobby, number one, and do you perform that hobby on a weekly basis? If you don't have an answer to the first question, then you really need to get one soon. And if you do have a hobby and yet you haven't done it in the last week, maximum 2 weeks, then I suggest you start to prioritize some time to have fun. Previous research has suggested that leisure participation is positively related to an individual's physical and psychological well-being. A greater diversity of physical activities has also appeared to be associated with higher psychological well-being and lower depressive symptoms, particularly as you get older. The findings that these studies have is that the leisure activities with the qualities best able to provide opportunities for freedom of choice, self-expression, creativity, and potentially a physical exertion of some degree, but not necessarily, bring about a higher psychological well-being and lower depression amongst older adults. So I'd really encourage you to play. Be silly for the sake of being silly. Have fun. Do something just for the sake of enjoying it. And have a hobby. So I believe if we can harness and be aware of those 4 things, be curious. What happens when I do this? Be curious about other people. Even if I don't necessarily agree with somebody, why have they come to that conclusion? That's interesting. Don't let the ego get involved. Why do they think that way? Why do they have a different opinion to me? Why does the world work like it works? And what happens if I do that? What happens if I do this? Be resilient. Have a healthy relationship with failure and have a healthy relationship with setbacks. And you will guarantee yourself success in the long term. Be in the moment. Be in awe. Be like a child that is seeing and experiencing everything for the first time. Try not to lose that. As you become familiar with the formality of life, try to become aware and be focused on how every day is different. And you'll attract more of that into your life. And finally, play. Do something for the sake of just having fun. And you'll become a person that is fun and is fun to be around. You will encourage other people who are equally fun and share the same opinions and views on the world as you, who are wanting to enjoy their lives. They will gravitate towards you and you to them. You'll have a community of people that when the time arises, you'll have that scaffolding to get you through the tough times, to level up, coming back to lesson number 2. So I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. These are the takeaways that I, for myself, are trying to consistently put into practice into my life, into my day. And I hope if any one of these 4 have proven to be beneficial to you, I sincerely hope that you find it useful. Number 1, and number 2, that you try your best to apply it as consistently as possible. Thank you very much for listening to this episode. I really enjoyed this deep dive. It was an interesting experience for me, trying something different. I'm curious to see how this episode is received. And who knows, maybe this is the first of many conversations between you and I. Please like, share, subscribe, and enjoy. Not so fast. And let me level with you. It is such a cool feeling when I see that Spotify subscribers number increase on the weekly, when I see the number of people listening to the episodes going up. And it really makes a huge difference. Have you ever done something and you feel so good when you get rewarded by some positive feedback and you really feel like you're making a difference? That's what it means to me, and that's how I feel. And it goes a long way if you like the show, share it, and subscribe it. Thank you humbly, and I'll see you next week.